Good morning, Mike's Diabetes World. Well, this says smoky condition, don't smell much, but hey, my pal is over there. Yeah, there he is. We're out in early walk. All good. Today, I want to discuss the diabetes sensor issues. Now, in Canada, we're fairly lucky that we have a lot more social nets than they do in the States. And there I haven't really come up with this issue, but I read online that a person with the Dex4 meter has been limited to the amount of test strips they can buy because their Dex4 can give the readings. Now, I tried to find anything about people in the States having problems with the Enlight sensor from Medtronic, though some people are saying that the Dex4 is more reliable. But my has been pretty good. But the Dex4 is a lot of people now, a lot of companies, insurance companies are looking at it. Well, you can use your Dex4 for treatment. Doesn't mean it's always going to be reliable, but you only need the 2 test strips to cover yourself. You just got to load it in twice and you can use your readings for treatment. Well, that's great if your meter, or not your meter, if your Dex4 is working all the time, that your sensor sites are good. But limiting just the number of test strips doesn't seem to be a solid financial stipulation. The amount that your body needs that changes the blood sugar throughout the day should be checked with test strips. For example, I, in theory, need to do 2 tests a day in order to keep my glucometer working fine. After that, it's anything more than that doesn't need to be done. But my blood sugars are so erratic that having a glucometer is a good thing to have. So if you're telling me I can only do 2 tests per day just to keep it in line, it doesn't really bode well for me. There are times where you have problems with your pumps or your sensors, and don't tell me, oh well, you're on the Dex4 and things are just going to be lovely, because things aren't going to be lovely. And I can see insurance companies wanting to save money, but that really shouldn't be the point that holds on to these test strips. It's a whole bunch of new technology. And what happens if you run out your sensor or there's some issue with the Dex4? Are you going to have to, well, no, I have to save my test strips. I can't do it, and therefore people are just going to get into A, a hoarding situation, and B, running out asking for emergency supplies. It pretty well isn't the fault of the user. And while the Dex4 and all the sensors are doing phenomenal jobs in trying to make sure diabetics are okay, it's a point that my she's not old, but old in my last endocrinologist and I discussed was that when they go super high and when they go super low, your blood sugar or the blood sugars from any of the sensors don't work as well. So why are we sitting there trying to limit the amount of blood sugars or blood testing? Doesn't mean just because they're getting good results, and the FDA has said this, and throughout the states there's a number of insurance companies who have decided to limit. So if you're going to limit tests per month, you're virtually opening your patients to a whole bunch more of what's the word I'm looking for? Diseases or complications. Not diseases, complications. If a person has brittle diabetes, they may have to check more often. But no, you get your 2 test strips a day, that's it. If you're going to limit, you're going to have to limit to at least 3 times the amount that you think. And brittle diabetics need more. It's as simple as that. It's not going to be, when you're limiting things on dollars and cents issues, it doesn't always work. But why do we do this? Well, they want to save money anywhere they can. And coming from a business background, I can understand this. What I can't understand is putting people's lives in danger. There's something that my whole life is built on, and that is levels of care. And yes, you have a Dexcom or you have a Enlight sensor, but that shouldn't be the only thing you need. If you run out of test strips because you've reached your limit, you had 1 bottle and that should have lasted you the whole month, is kind of ridiculous. So if the person gets sick or is having erratic blood sugars and you need more than that, people aren't going to test. They're just going to sit there and wait and possibly end up in a DKA situation. Well, if they go super high, they should have got medical attention. And what's the medical attention going to say? They're going to say, well, you should be testing more often. But you can't test because... And I do understand that the test strips are pretty expensive. But limiting people's care doesn't work well this way. We need to come up with a logical situation, and right now, 30 days, so 60 test strips. What happens if there's a faulty test strips, or it doesn't work that well? And I'm fairly lucky in Canada that I've won a judgment that I'm able to get my sensors covered. A lot of people don't. So it's not that big of an issue in Canada. But the FDA has said that the DEX4 results can be used for treatment. And that they need to do a blood test in the morning and at night to calibrate. So 2 times a day, which anyone who has a pump does this. Oh, I'm looking forward to my new pump and the new sensor. Oh, sorry, it's not a new sensor. It's the same sensor, but it's a new transmitter. And it supposedly can convert things easier. So often, we've got to come up with a sensible care item. And limiting the amount of test strips to just 2 a day without any backup is idiotic. So often I've done a test strip and it comes out, sorry, wrong. And it's not reading correct, or that I've had to use more test strips. And I go through 4 to 5 test strips a day. And because they don't always read when, excuse me, right when they're high or when you're super low, I've got to check with a test strip. So if you're just saying 2 test strips a day, you got to have more than just 60 test strips available to you. I'm sorry, it's maybe set realistic amount of test strips, but you as the insurance companies know best. And oh, I'm sorry, nope, you can't have that because you have the Dexcom. And if they're flagged for having the Dexcom, sorry, I'm just looking, then there's never a winning. But people need to wake up and understand that diabetic care is a lot more. And, it's not people's fault that they get these diseases. And you have wanted their business, and you've gone out and tried to build the business. So listen up. Set realistic goals. Maybe double what your estimators have wondered should be available. A person shouldn't have to go without test strips. And if they've had an emergency and they had to go back to insulin and the sensor or the sensors don't work or whatever, they've got a reliable source if they have to go back to the needle for a bit until they can get things covered. It's another form of big business taking over the care of people. Now, let me put this in perspective. There are a number of people out there who will hoard. Oh well, yes, I'll keep saving. I'll get, there's some doctors who will prescribe this even though it's not needed, and oh well, I can still get my mother's, and I'll just keep hoarding them. Well, those are the people that the insurance companies should go after, not the people who are trying to control their diabetes sensibly. And the Dex4, while it's a good program, it's not the only answer. And sometimes we need the reliability of just seeing what your blood sugars are. Well, I hope it never comes to Canada, but we can only hope. So, in Canada, we have a lot more social justice. And that's a plus. Sorry, but we need to take a moment and breathe and work with the company to come out with a workable amount of test strips for you. And if you have some left over, don't order as much. Nico, behind. Good morning. Have a good day, and we'll talk again soon. Bye now.